I think it was John Ortberg that said, if you want to draw a big crowd at church on a Sunday morning, talk about sex. Because people like to hear and talk about sex. Or if you want to draw a big crowd at church, talk about the end times. Because people are really interested, for whatever reason, in the end times. But if you want to draw a really big crowd at church, talk about sex in the end times, and you won't be able to find enough seats to fill all the people. Well, there's still some empty seats here, so we're not talking about sex in the end times today, nor are we talking about the end times. As we continue here in our series called Take Back Your Marriage, we are looking at a component, an aspect of our marriage, of our humanity that is real, that it's vital, and it's important. A lot of churches don't like to talk about this subject. They tend to shy away from it. We think that there's no better place to talk about something that's God-given and God-designed than at church. Last week, we spent our time together talking about fun. We talked about the fact that couples don't fall in love without having some kind of fun, right? And the reality is it's going to be very difficult to sustain a marriage over the long haul without having fun as a part of the marriage ongoing. We don't fall in love without having fun, and we're not probably going to stay in love without having fun. Last week, we identified two specific kinds of fun. We talked about face-to-face fun. Face-to-face fun is the time that we spend together talking, sharing our feelings, talking about our future, planning, dreaming together, just staying in touch with one another, using words. And then we talked about side-by-side fun, which is the kind of fun that we have when we do things together, when we share experiences together, when we do things that are just fun together. And this week, as promised, we're going to talk about a third kind of fun, belly button to belly button fun. At the outset of this series, we determined that our marriages are intended to reflect God's love for us. They're a picture of spiritual intimacy that can't really be replicated in any other way. At the outset of this series, we talked about the fact that God exists in three persons, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, three distinct persons that become one. And our marriages are similar. They at least represent what God is, as two people become one flesh. Your marriage, including sexual intimacy, is tied directly to the mission that God has for the world. And God's mission is simply to save the world for himself, to engage in a relationship with all people. And the greatest lesson that Jesus teaches his disciples in the Bible is the lesson of servanthood. He taught them about being a servant. He modeled for them servanthood, and he modeled for us, as we read the scripture, he modeled servanthood. The greatest marriage in the world that you see is two servants in love with one another, people who really get that. Two people with a mutual desire and a mutual commitment to serve one another selflessly. Sex is beautiful, and it's a fulfilling component to our marriage when both spouses serve one another selflessly, when they have a servant spirit. And God has made this union between a man and a woman, two different physical beings. We're different physically, we're different emotionally, we are different chemically when it comes to our hormones, and we are brought together as one in marriage and in sex. You know, sex is one of the only physical needs that we have as human beings that requires another person to be fully satisfied. Think about that for a moment. It's a physical need we have that must have another person in order to be fully satisfied. Now, let's face it. Men and women are different. We talked about this a little bit last week when we talked about the different kinds of fun, because I threw this out there. I said, before we talk about face-to-face and side-by-side fun, some of you are going to think that this face-to-face fun thing sounds like fun, And some of you are going to think that that kind of fun sounds kind of painful. And the same thing with the side-by-side fun, okay? Because men and women, we operate differently. We're wired differently. We talked about the face-to-face fun specifically. We said that, for women, it is fun to talk. But let's face it, guys are born with a low talk drive and a high sex drive. Women, conversely, typically have a very high talk drive and a very low sex drive. And under the covers, we're very different too. This probably won't come as a surprise to you, but a third of women, are more sexually driven than their spouses. That means that 2/3 of all men are more sexually driven than their wife. And again, that probably doesn't surprise you in any way. God gave men this drive for sex, but he gave women the gift of sex. And as we talk about this today, we need to process that. We need to have those glasses on. That for men it's a drive, for women it's a gift. And we have to figure out how to put these things together to maximize it and to honor God in the way that we enact sex in our marriage relationship. So 2/3 of all men are more sexually driven than their wives. Women, your husband is not a pervert. Okay? He's not a pervert. He's not a dog. I know for some of you think, well, all he thinks about is sex, food, and sleep, and occasionally sports, right? I can't comment on the sports thing. The food, eating, sleeping, and sex are things that God has innately put in our nature, and they are things that drive us. There is an ebb and flow of our life that is God-given. Physical intimacy is a process in our marriage. It's a process. Okay, and we have to recognize that. When two people get married, they begin a sexual journey with one another, with your spouse. Sometimes it doesn't pan out the way that you thought it would. Sometimes the sparks that you dreamt of or that you hoped for just aren't there. The reality is, if you're one of the few people in the world today that actually saves yourself for your spouse, which incidentally I believe is the way that God intended for it to be, you get into your marriage relationship and you begin to share intimacy with your spouse, doing things with them that you've never done with anyone else before. And yes, of course, you've dreamt about what it was going to be like. You've fantasized about what it was going to be like. You've thought about it. You've processed it. And you get there, and sometimes, it's really not all that I thought it was going to be. Now, at first, we might enjoy it, but that's because it's new. Especially if this is the first person we've ever shared intimacy with. It's something new. It's something different. And because we enjoy intimacy with our spouse, we enjoy being sexually engaged with them, even though we might not necessarily be enjoying the sex itself. Eventually, what rolls in is what I call the sushi factor. I shared this with you last week. I call the sushi factor things that we do with the person that we're in love with that we kind of go through, we endure because of the person we're with. For me, it's like sushi. When Elizabeth and I were dating, if she wanted to eat sushi, I don't really like sushi, but I liked her a lot. So if she wanted to eat sushi, I'd be willing to go and eat sushi with her because I wanted to be with her. I wanted that experience with her. Now we've been married for 11 years, and if she even suggests remotely sushi, I hand her a debit card and say, go help yourself. I'm going to heat up a pizza. All right, I'm not into sushi. And sex can fall into the same sushi trap in our marriage. At first, it's something we do because we enjoy the person we're with, and we appreciate the intimacy we've never experienced with this person before, but eventually, because we're not really enjoying it, we don't really have the desire to continue doing it. I remember someone telling me once that if you put a coin in a jar every time you have a sexual experience with your spouse in the first year of your marriage, okay? So put a jar by the bed, and every time you have sex with your spouse, put a coin in it for year number 1. And then beginning in year number 2, every time you have sex with your spouse, you begin taking a coin out. And this person said, you will never remove all the coins that you put in the first year throughout the rest of your life. So Elizabeth and I got married 11 years ago, and I decided to try it. Well, year number 1 was a good one. And so in 10 years since, I'm just kidding. I didn't really do that. This doesn't even belong to me. This is Dean and Cindy's. I saw this a few weeks ago when we were helping them move, and I said, oh, I've got a perfect use for that. Can I borrow? Dean said yes. Anyway, thank you, Dean. I'm done with that. Listen, it's funny when you think about that concept, but in reality, it's not funny. That's not the way it should work in our marriage. Sex should get better as you mature and as your marriage matures. It starts out with a bang, and then typically for the next 10, 20, 40, 60 years of our lives, it goes downhill, and it shouldn't be that way. If it's not getting better through the course of your married life together, it's probably because you don't have a clear understanding of how it should actually work. Sex in marriage is constantly changing. Ups and downs, highs and lows, ebbs and flows. As we age, things change. I think one of God's great practical jokes to mankind is the fact that men reach their sexual peak when they're in their early 20s. And women don't reach their sexual peak until they're in their late 30s or early 40s. Thank you, God. What's that all about? I don't know. Maybe he did it just to keep us guessing. But it is a reality. So many of us, young men, we get married in our 20s, and we are in our sexual prime, and then we have to wait 15 years for our wife to catch up with us. And by the time she's caught up with us, by the time she's where we are, we're on the downhill slide. Sex in our marriage changes as life circumstances change. We introduce children into the equation of our married life. Boy, does sex change once you've had kids. Nod your heads if you agree with me. There should be lots of bobbing going on here. Okay, it does. As your career changes, as your job changes, as your health changes, your sex in your relationship, in your marriage will change. Our bodies change as we age, and because our bodies change, our sex drives will change. As we age, there are certain things that we can control, such as our weight, our physical fitness. There are certain things that we can control. But listen, you can't control the hormonal stuff. You can't control what your body is doing. It's just the way that God designed it to be. Rarely will you and your spouse ever have the same desires at the same time. It's very rare that you and your spouse will have the same desires at the same time. So when you do, go ahead and finish what you're doing. Don't stop. But when you do, when you're done, what you need to do is you need to race out to the local trophy store, and you need to get a plaque made. Get it engraved with the date, the time, the location, that the two of you actually had the same desires at the same time, okay? Commemorate this moment. Hang it somewhere prominently in your house so that you can say, yes, we were in the same place. We were on the same page, same day, same time, same location, same moment, right? Hang that up. You ever seen this in mine and Elizabeth's house? That's not really what it is. You're wondering because you can't read it. It's actually about baseball. Hitting home runs. Ba-dum-chink. Come on, just kidding. Seriously. Listen, sex cannot be fulfilling in your marriage. Listen to this. Sex cannot be fulfilling in your marriage if it is based on mutual desires. Listen, your desires will rarely cross paths. So if that's what you're depending on, feeding the fulfillment of your marriage relationship, you will be disappointed most of the time. However, sex can be amazing if it is based on mutual commitment. Sex cannot be fulfilling if it's based on mutual desires. It can be amazing if it's based on a mutual commitment to one another. As we were beginning to do our study in preparation for this series, I stumbled across a website called marriagetoday.com. And on this website, Pastor Jimmy Evans and his wife Karen do a lot of biblically based marriage teaching. There's some fantastic stuff on there. Blog posts, articles, video teaching. It's fantastic. One of the things that Pastor Evans talks about in one of his lessons is the key ingredients to having a healthy and fulfilling sex life. And I thought they were fantastic when I heard him talk about these, so I decided to share them with you today. Now, I might not get them verbatim, but I took sort of the broad strokes of what he teaches because I think these principles are actually fantastic. So we're going to talk about the 3 ingredients to a healthy and fulfilling sex life in your marriage, okay? Then we're going to start with ingredient number 1. The first ingredient is a commitment to meeting your spouse's needs. A commitment to meeting your spouse's needs. See, it starts with servanthood. We talked about servanthood before. It has to start with me processing my spouse's needs, not my own. You have to understand, first off, that your spouse is different than you are. I mean, you know that, but you really need to know that, right? Men and women are wired differently. We are driven differently sexually. Okay? Women need to feel connected emotionally before they're ever able to ramp up their need and their desire for physical connectivity. Okay, the emotional connection is a very important thing for them. We talked about that in the face-to-face fun last week. Conversation, sharing life with one another for women is as much about communication and conversation as it is about anything else. See, men, we have the ability to compartmentalize. We can block out whatever we need to block out for the sake of getting done what needs to get done. When there are twins of a gazelle present, those of you who were here last week know what I'm referring to, that's all we see. That's all we need to see. The house can be burning down around us, but we can focus on the job at hand because we can compartmentalize. Women, on the other hand, have a tendency to need to clear distractions before they're able to engage sexually, intimately. Okay? For us, twins of a gazelle are there and we're on duty and we're good to go. But for our wife, she might be processing that there's laundry in the dryer that needs to be folded and put away before she can release herself to be free to be intimate with you. Much worse, she might be thinking about the fact that before she put that laundry in the dryer, she forgot to change the lint filter in the dryer, so she might actually be starting a lint fire. The house is going to burn down, but never mind, you'll never notice because twins of a gazelle are there and you've blocked it all out. You with me? Okay? While we guys, we're able to compartmentalize and shut off all that stuff, she's got this cloud of stuff. Lunches need to be made for school. Groceries need to be bought. Bills need to be paid. Neighbor needs to be visited. Mom needs to be called. Laundry needs to be folded and put away. And if she can't clear those distractions, it's going to be very challenging for her to give herself over to her husband intimately in a way that's going to be successful because it's just too much distraction. See, men and women are different. My friend Ted Adamanis sent me a picture that is men and women explained by engineers. We have this picture here. See, we have men. We're pretty simple. It's on or it's off. It doesn't get much more complicated than that. But look at our woman over here. Switches and dials and readouts and all kinds of stuff that has to be managed in order for sexual intimacy to be successful. Most of us, we just don't get that. In fact, that writing on there looks like Russian. It's what it sounds like to us. It's what it looks like to us. Listen, I'm going to start with one point this morning for the men. Listen to this. Men, you need to work on your approach. For most guys, our approach is not much more than just dropping the drawers and hitting the sack and we're ready to go. Okay? But you need to work on your approach because that approach is probably not going to enable the success that you're desiring in your relationship. Okay? You need to be loving. You need to be tender. You need face-to-face time with your wife. That needs to be part of your approach. You need to recognize what the distractions are for her. You may not ever get all of that, but if you can identify a few of them, then get off the couch and fold the laundry and put it away and help deal with that distraction, whatever it might be. Help put those things aside. Man, you've got to work on your approach. Women, you need to get an approach. You need to have one. You need to be willing. You need to be available to your husband. Just have an approach. And recognizing what the distractions are for you and what the challenges are for you as a woman should enable you to develop your approach. Women need to initiate towards their husbands sometimes. Doesn't have to be all the time, but it should be sometimes. It's part of this mutual commitment to meeting each other's needs. And you need to let each other's needs dictate your actions. Guys, you've got to hear this. And wives, you need to hear it too. You need to let your spouse's needs dictate your actions. So your approach is based on what your spouse needs, not based on what you want or need. You know, sometimes we need to commit to meeting our spouse's needs, and it might mean that we have to trust that our feelings for doing so will follow the actions that we put into play. I talked about that a little bit last week. Sometimes we need to look at our own lawn, recognize the work that needs to be done, put our gardening gloves on. It's safer that way. And we need to tend to our own lawn. And sometimes it's hard work. Sometimes we don't feel like doing those things. This is more typical with wives than it is with husbands. Sometimes you, or maybe a lot of the time, you just don't feel like meeting your husband's needs. But listen, this is part of doing the hard work of investing in our marriage relationship. It means sometimes doing things that you don't feel like doing, but you know in your heart you need to do. And I said this last week, I will repeat it again. Sometimes you just have to trust that if you do it with the right spirit, the right attitude, with a godly perspective, if you invite God into the process, that He will give you the feelings that you desire to have in that process. Our feelings will follow our actions if we're doing what we need to do and we're investing in the right place and in the right way. Our first ingredient is committing to meeting one another's needs. Our ingredient number 2 is communicating your needs. Okay? It makes it very difficult for us to commit to meeting one another's needs if we actually don't know what those needs are. So it requires communicating our needs to one another. We have to do this. You cannot be ashamed. You are laminated with this person. Sometimes it's hard for us to talk about these things, but listen, there should be nobody on the planet that you should be able to lovingly and graciously share your needs with than your spouse. In fact, unless you're receiving counseling or therapy, there's no one who should know what your needs and your desires are except for your spouse. Don't be ashamed. Communicate your needs. Women, this is an area where men are simply dumb. D-U-M-B. Dumb. You need to dumb it down for us. We need to know how to get you in the sack. And we need to know what to do when we get there. You saw the dials and switches. Come on, it is like a foreign language to us. We need instructions and we need details. Okay? There are a lot of areas in life that you keep us guessing. It's part of the game between men and women. There are a lot of areas that you keep us guessing. But let me tell you something. If you have needs that are not being met sexually in your relationship with your husband, it's not, I can almost guarantee, it's not because he doesn't want to meet those needs. He just doesn't have a clue as to where to start. Seriously. We are smart in a lot of things, but we're not smart to figure this stuff out. Again, maybe part of God's great practical joke on mankind. But listen, you've got to dumb it down for us. You have to communicate to us. Men, you need to ask your wife the question. And then when she's giving you the answer, you need to listen to the answer. And then you need to ask for the details. And then what do you need to do, guys? Listen to the details. Face-to-face fun, right? talking about sex can be face-to-face fun. We have to do this graciously and lovingly, like servants. And when we do this, we can have great success in the context of our married relationship. So the second ingredient is communicating our needs to one another. The third ingredient to having a healthy and fulfilling sexual relationship is a commitment to sexual purity. Sex is spiritual before it is anything else. Two become one. God made this amazing thing. Two become one. Since it is a spiritual act, since it is spiritual, anything that we let invade our sexual relationship with our spouse that's sinful does nothing but destroy what God intended to be good. If you don't walk away hearing, knowing, understanding anything else today, the next statement that I'm about to make should be your takeaway. Okay? And if you need to write it down, you can write it down. There's space on the back of your bulletin. I'm going to talk to men first. Men, I'm going to say this twice so you make sure you get it, okay? Men, your wife is your only legitimate outlet for your sexual desires. Period. I'm going to say it again. Men, your wife is your only legitimate outlet for your sexual desires. Women, you are your husband's only legitimate outlet for his sexual desires. Period. That fact, that information, really should dictate our behavior and dictate our relationship with one another sexually. Guys, we have to focus where we're supposed to focus. And wives, you need to be receptive. Now, how we get there is a process. Men are visual. We're visual learners. We're visually stimulated. And we live in a world and in a culture today that is rampant with sexually provocative images. It's everywhere we go, everywhere we look. You know, it's difficult to go through any day without seeing sexually provocative images. Whether you're driving down the highway and looking at billboards, standing at the cash-out register at the superstore, flipping through the channels on the TV, it's virtually impossible not to see things. And you can't help what you see, but you can help what you process. Once it goes in the eyes, what happens in the head is under your control. We have to learn to deal with that. There's a fantastic book written by Stephen Arterburn called Every Man's Battle. It's a fantastic book dealing with this kind of issue. The reality is that title sums it up very well. It is every man's battle. Different men have different levels of victory. Different men have different levels of temptation, but it is every man's battle. The visual. Another area that's tough for us is in our culture today, it is not uncommon for men and women to spend time together with people of the opposite sex alone. This is a cultural thing. It's culturally accepted, and it's something that has committed husbands and wives. I don't care if you call yourself a Christian or not. If you are a committed husband or wife, this is an area that you have to take very seriously. My wife and I made a commitment to one another 11 years ago when we got married that we would not spend any time alone, one-to-one, with a person of the opposite sex. It doesn't mean that we don't have friends of people of the opposite gender. It doesn't mean that we don't spend time with people of the opposite sex, but it means we don't spend time alone, period, with people of the opposite sex. This is to protect our marriage and our relationship with one another. And the culture doesn't get this. I still remember a situation that happened about 5 or 6 years ago where we had some friends coming over to visit us at our house, and Elizabeth was at home alone. And the husband showed up before the wife about 20 minutes before she arrived. We didn't know they weren't coming together, and Elizabeth was at home alone. And this gentleman knocked on the door, and Elizabeth said, "Well, Bart's not here." And he didn't get it. And she eventually had to come straight out and say, I can't let you in. I know it's only going to be 15 or 20 minutes, but I can't let you hang out in our house with me when Bart is not here and your wife is not here. He was gravely offended. His wife, even more so. How dare we ever think that he might do something? No, that's not what this was about. It was about a commitment that we made to one another. And honoring the commitment that we made to one another. We almost lost that friendship. It almost went away completely. Elizabeth shed more tears over that than I think I've seen her cry over just about anything in our marriage. It was hard. We were able to salvage the relationship and restore the relationship, but the reality is, listen, that's our rule. As a pastor, it's been very difficult for me over the last dozen years because there are times when I'm asked to meet with people or counsel people or coach people in ministry, people of the opposite sex. And I just have a rule. I don't do it one-to-one when it's a woman. If I have to, if there's absolutely positively no way to avoid it, I go to a public place and I let my wife and I let another one of my ministry partners know where I am and who I'm with and how long I plan to be there. In the rare occasion that I have to meet with someone in my office, I make sure that the office door is open and I clearly communicate to someone else in the building that I am meeting with this woman in my office. Could you please come by every 5 minutes and just give us a wave hello? I avoid that situation at all possibilities. Sometimes it's impossible, but boy, I put my safeguards up. I don't even like being on an elevator with another woman between the second and the third floor when it's just the two of us. Why? Because I know me. I know who I am. Sometimes drastic situations call for drastic measures, and we have to put up boundaries and safeguards in our lives. Men, some of you have jobs where you're required to spend time one-on-one with another woman. You need to figure out how to create clear boundaries and put up good safeguards in your life, and you can't avoid it. Boy, you need to rethink your career. I know some of you are sitting here saying, well, you just don't understand my job. You don't understand my job. You don't understand my career. You know what? I understand your marriage, and I understand you as a man. And if you tell me that your job and your career can't be changed because of that, then I feel sorry for your wife because you're telling me that your job, your career is more important than your marriage. I'm sorry if that sounds harsh, but that's the reality of it. I'm going to talk for a minute about pornography. I could do a whole message series on pornography. I won't. I'm going to give you a few little points here. Pornography is a billion-dollar industry in the world, not because of teenage boys who are doing things that their mothers don't know. They are certainly a component of the industry. Pornography is not a billion-dollar industry because of non-Christian, non-married men, or because of non-Christian married men. Pornography is a billion-dollar industry because of men. It is every man's battle. And today, in the year 2012, it is more accessible than it has ever been in our lifetimes. And it is killing marriages. It is every man's battle. And I stand here before you telling you, it is every man's battle. I made a decision a long time ago that I needed accountability in my life, and I started meeting with guys one-to-one and giving them permission to ask me the hard questions. Bart, everything okay there? I was very fortunate. A number of years ago, I discovered a ministry called XXXchurch.com. It's the largest Christian porn site on the internet. It's actually the only Christian porn site, but that's their claim to fame. This is a ministry dedicated to helping men deal with these issues, regardless of what level the struggle is. They have on their website a software you can download to your computer or to your phone called X3 Watch. There is a free version and there's a pay subscription version. What X3 Watch does is it runs in the background of your computer, and you can set up a couple of buddies to be your accountability partners. You plug in their emails, and anytime you go somewhere on your computer that you shouldn't be going, your buddies get an email. And hopefully you get a phone call if you've picked the right buddies. Now, I put this on my computers years ago. I still remember, probably about 6 or 7 years ago, I get a phone call from my accountability partner, Mike. Mike and I had been meeting for a number of years as accountability partners, and once I discovered this X3 watch, I plugged him in as one of my 2 accountability partners, and he phones me up, and Mike's he's one of the elders at Grace. He was kind of a shy, quiet guy, and he calls me up, hey Bart, we need to talk. I'm like, well, what's up? Yeah, I got this email. Okay. And so we proceed to have this discussion, and I am just dumbfounded. I'd been a good boy. I really had. I hadn't gone anywhere I shouldn't have gone. I hadn't been looking at anything I hadn't looked at, and I hadn't turned it off. That's another thing. If you disable it or turn it off, it actually sends your accountability partners an email to let them know that you've disabled it, right? All right, this is true accountability here. So he phones me up, and we start wrestling through this, and I'm going, I've been a good boy. Boy, this is not good. What's going on here? And after a few minutes of discussion, what we discovered was that my wife had actually been using my computer, and she had read a Yahoo News article about people getting skin cancer from sunbathing. And it just so happened that some of the tag words in that article were nude, sunbathing, and cheerleader. And so that flagged this website for my buddy Mike. We got a good chuckle after it was all done with, but you know what? It gave me faith in the system, that's for sure. Because I hadn't done anything wrong, but boy, I knew that if I had crossed the line, he was going to call me on it. I meet with Dean. Dean and I try to meet every week. He's been traveling a lot lately. We haven't been meeting so much lately, but since the beginning of our relationship together, we started meeting one-on-one. We have the questions written down that we have permission to ask each other at any time. Are you looking at anything you shouldn't be looking at? Yes or no? Have you put yourself in a position, a compromising position with a woman? Yes or no? And we ask each other this question, and Lord willing, we're being honest with each other because we're not going to grow, we're not going to get any better as men and as husbands unless we're being honest with one another. Life groups, we call that one-to-one meeting. Anybody at Grasslands can be in a life group. If you need an accountability partner, let us know. Hey, ladies, guys wrestle with the visual, with the porn thing, but your mental stuff, your mental fantasies are just as bad. They're just as destructive. I still remember going to a baseball game last summer. We were at a tournament in Airdrie, and the team that I was coaching had the evening off, so I went to see some of the older boys play, the 13 and 14-year-old boys. I knew some of the boys. I knew their parents. And I'm at the ball field, and I'm sitting on a bench with my buddy, and there's this row of moms in folding chairs, lawn chairs, right in front of us. They're right on the fence, and we're all watching the game. And I'm listening to these women have this conversation, and they're kind of chatty and giggly and embarrassed, and there's this dialogue going on. And after a few minutes, I realized that what they were talking about was that they were all reading the book 50 Shades of Grey. Now, if you don't know what 50 Shades of Grey is, it is an international bestseller. It is basically mental porn. It is erotic, pulp fiction fantasy, specifically designed to get women's imaginations going. Now, some of you chuckle when I mention this, but here's the reality. If my buddy and I had been sitting there at that baseball game talking about the latest issue of Playboy or Penthouse magazine and the articles we were reading and the pictures we were looking at, those moms would have taken baseball bats to us. Because that's not socially acceptable. But it's for some reason socially acceptable for them to sit there and talk about their erotic fantasies and what they like about the book. They're basically cheating on their husbands in their minds with the character in this book. And it's okay for them to do that? I'm sorry, it's not okay. If you've read the book, I don't judge you. Maybe you didn't know any better. Hopefully you'll know better after today. And anything like that. Here's another area. Some of you are saying, well, I don't read that kind of stuff. That's not a problem for me. How about Facebook? How about the guy from high school that you knew, that you've reconnected with, who you are now, I don't know, just exchanging messages with periodically, trading pictures with, looking at his pictures. Maybe he's newly divorced. Maybe he's never gotten married. he's so adventurous and he's so successful in his career, and you always knew he would be in high school, and now you're entertaining this relationship. It's all harmless, isn't it? I don't know, is it? The problem never starts in the loins, ladies. It always starts in the mind. And you need to guard your minds. So we're big on this here at Grasslands. If you're a man or a woman, husband or wife, and any of this has any ring of truth to it, and you think that you need partnership in this walk, you let me know, you let Pastor Oliver know, you can talk to my wife, you can talk to his wife, talk to us confidentially. It's all confidential, we promise. But listen, we can't do this, we can't get through this if we don't work on it together. An accountability partner, accountability in your life is the best safeguard for you. Listen, this is a sermon, and so I need to read the Bible. I haven't done that yet. We're going to turn to the book of Genesis, chapter 25, verses 29 to 34, and we're going to read a short story here, a little excerpt of a story about two twin brothers named Jacob and Esau. Some of you are processing, I know that story, what's it got to do with sex? Hang on. Jacob and Esau were twin brothers. Esau was born before his brother, moments before his brother. Their father was very wealthy and land, livestock, servants, and Esau was the heir apparent to his father's riches. Very different personalities here. You can imagine what it would be like to be a twin brother and to know that your twin was going to receive all of your father's inheritance. It might create a little bit of tension and animosity in your relationship. You think? Maybe? Okay. We're going to read verse 29. It says, once when Jacob, this is the younger brother, was cooking stew, Esau came in from the field and he was exhausted. And Esau said to Jacob, let me eat some of that red stew, for I am exhausted. Therefore his name was called Edom, which means red. Jacob said, sell me your birthright now. What? Where did that come from? Hey, can I have some of your soup? I'm really hungry. Give me your birthright. Okay, obviously, this is something that Jacob has been processing. Perhaps it's something they've even discussed before, right? Twin brothers, if you were a twin, you would think everything should be split evenly, right? Even if you weren't a twin, that's what you would be thinking. But the culture of the day said that the firstborn, which was Esau in this situation, was to receive the birthright, the father's inheritance. So Esau said, I'm about to die. Of what use is a birthright to me? Jacob said, swear to me now. So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank and rose and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. Did that really just happen? For a bowl of stew, red soup, he gave away his entire inheritance. Now, I know you're wondering what this might have to do with sex. The answer is nothing. It doesn't have anything to do with sex. What it does for us, though, is it gives us a little glimpse into some basic human nature, right? These two men lived approximately 3,000 years ago. And yet we can clearly see in Esau some of the same disposition, personality, problem, characteristics that are identical to us today in the year 2012. We live in a time and in a culture that I like to call the gotta have it now generation. I gotta have it now. We expect everything now. We expect everything fast. The faster things get, the faster we need them to be. Why is our credit card debt in Canada, North America, as high as it is? Because we can have things now. I got to have it now. Where else in the world do people stare into the window of a microwave oven, impatiently waiting for a hot meal to pop out? Will this never be done? My wife is so impatient when it comes to the microwave that she'll set the microwave for 2 minutes and then she stops it when it gets down to 4 seconds. Like my kids didn't know for years that you could actually tell the time by looking at the clock on the microwave because it always said 4 or 7. Or if she's having a really impatient day, 22. I'd say, Ephraim, go tell me what time it is. He'd look at the microwave. Go look in the microwave. Tell me what time it is. 17. Listen, I don't even know if my wife knows that if you let the timer go all the way down to 0, that it actually bings and stops cooking, because she's never let it get down that far. But that's human nature. Why wait that extra 4 seconds if we don't need to wait the extra 4 seconds? How many of you know what this sound is? Now, seriously, it wasn't that long ago that we had to wait 26 seconds to actually connect to the internet. How many of you remember that? I mean, heaven forbid somebody would actually send us an email with an attachment, right? We could block up our phone line for an entire day trying to see this picture that they took, right? And scanned and emailed to us. I read a statistic the other day that said that the average person spends approximately 30 seconds on a website. 30 seconds, that's today. It used to take 30 seconds just to load a basic HTML page with no images, right? Long gone are the days of dial-up. Boy, and we're glad, because now we can, in the palm of our hand on our phone, get 4G or 5G or 14G or whatever it is. Man, it's fast. The faster things get, the faster we want them to be. Listen, Esau was hungry. He was famished. He was about to die, he said to his brother. His gotta-have-it-now nature completely took over, and it cost him everything. I've already mentioned the material riches that he was entitled to in his father's estate. But listen, the implications here are so much bigger than that, because you see, God ended up building an entire nation, the entire nation of Israel, off of the bloodline of his brother Jacob, the one who wasn't supposed to receive the inheritance. The tribes of Israel are all named after Jacob's sons and grandsons. Should that have been Esau? Should it have been? Did he really give up being the father of an entire nation for a bowl of soup? It's so easy for us to forget the blessing that God intends for our lives and in our marriages because we get so impatient. How often does our own Esau behavior prevent us from receiving the blessing that God intends for us? Sometimes we just never know. Esau, boy, hindsight was probably 20/20. What a mistake he made. When it comes to our sexual desires, are we really willing to give up what God has in store for us in our marriages for whatever stares at us in that moment? Man, sometimes that greener grass over there looks so much better. And my grass, it's brown and it's dusty and it needs so much work in order to look like what that grass over there looks like. And I can have that now. I can be with her now. I can see that now. I can make myself feel better now. I can talk to him now. And it seems so much easier, and it's definitely a lot faster than tending to our own lawn and getting our own marriage where it needs to be. And when we do that, man, not only do we wreck our marriage, but we miss out on so much blessing that God intends for us in our marriages. Gotta have it now. You gotta stop. Don't trade your marriage for a bowl of soup. It's just not worth it. My wife likes to wash our car. It's one of her hobbies, I guess. I know you're all jealous. I am married to a wonderful woman who likes to wash the car. She scrubs it, inside, outside, top to bottom. You could eat off the floor in our car after she's done cleaning it. I came home once in the summer, and she's in the driveway washing the car, and our garden hose has to reach from our backyard. It goes down through the side between the houses and out across the front yard and into the driveway. And I came up to the house, and I saw her washing the car, and I just started laughing because our garden hose was stretched out across our lawn and our neighbor's lawn and across the sidewalk, and it was duct taped in about 20 different places, and everywhere that it was duct taped, there was water spewing, right? It's going this way, and it's going that way, and she's watering our lawn, she's watering the neighbor's lawn, there's water running down the sidewalk, it's pooling out in the street, and meanwhile, she's way over here spraying the car, right? And there's water everywhere. I started thinking about how our sex life, how the purity of our sex life is a lot like this garden hose. You see, every time we engage in behavior, activity, thoughts, or ideas that are sinful in the context of our marriage relationship, our sexual purity, it's like poking a hole in the garden hose. And every time you poke a hole, you spring a leak. And every time you spring a leak, you reduce the force of the water, of the energy that's supposed to be flowing to the nozzle, to where it's intended to be. And you can wrap duct tape around it if you want. You can try to patch it up and bandage it up, but man, you can still have a big mess on your hand. And once you spring a leak, sometimes the leak just keeps getting bigger and bigger, and it tears. And before long, all the water is running out the side of the hose, and there's nothing coming to the end. And then we wonder why we don't have the desires to be with our spouse that we need to have for our spouse. We wonder why we can't give them what we really want to give them or need to give them. It's because we've sprung too many leaks. Now, this is a new hose to replace the old hose, but let me tell you something. You can't just change your marriage, get rid of one marriage and try another and expect it to be any better, because as I shared with you earlier in this series, like a dog returns to its vomit, so a fool repeats his folly. And if you struggled with pornography in your first marriage, you're going to struggle with pornography in your second marriage, your third marriage, your fourth marriage. If you struggle with lust and fantasies, if you struggle with having affairs and being faithful to your spouse in your first marriage, your second marriage, if you've poked holes in the hose in the first marriage, you will repeat that folly, fool, unless you make a change. Man, it just breaks my heart to think that we, as such intelligent people, can be so dumb and be fooled by what the world has to offer us and not recognize that what we're doing is so destructive to our marriages, to this person that we've made this covenant relationship with. Three ingredients to a healthy and successful sexual relationship with your spouse. 1, commit to meeting each other's needs. Serve one another. Come into it with a servant spirit, a servant attitude. 2, communicate your needs. Have a conversation. Face-to-face fun. Talk about it. Guys, ask for the details and then listen to the details, right? And 3, commit to sexual purity. Cut the stuff out. You know what? You can't change what you've done in the past, but you can definitely control what you do in the future. And if you need help, don't be afraid to reach out and ask for it. It could save your marriage. Let me pray for you, and then I'm going to have Dave come down here for just a few minutes. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, man, we're so sorry that we've screwed this sex thing up. It is such a beautiful and amazing thing that you've given to us. And when we do it right, it is so wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for sex. Thank you for all that it means. Thank you for the representation of your love for us, the intimacy that we can share with you. Help us to get it right, God. Help us to get it right. Help us to be convicted in the areas where we need to be convicted and committed in the areas where we need to be committed. Help us to support one another in this great journey, Lord. We thank you for just giving us the time here today. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen.